Hey guys, welcome back. In a previous video, I did a teardown on an Apple AirPod charging case, and in this video, I'll be opening up the highly popular Nintendo Switch gaming console to show you the inside and how to replace the internal battery, a noisy or faulty CPU fan, or even a faulty speaker. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is point out the location of the screws I'm going to be removing. You have two on the bottom right here next to the USB charging port. On the side, you have the game controller slide rail. There's 5 Phillips screws there that are going to be removed. Spin around to the top side. There's 1 Phillips screw located next to the exhaust for the cooling fan. And you have 5 screws on the other game control rail. Now on the top, there's 4 screws holding the cover down, and they're tri-wing screws. And underneath the cover, right over here, is where the SD micro is, and there's a Phillips screw. Okay, to make the job very easy disassembling this unit, I'm going to be using this motion-controlled electronic screwdriver. It works very quickly and it has all kinds of different torque control settings. Super useful gadget. And you can see all the tools I'm using for this disassembly at the upper left-hand corner of your screen. I placed links in the video description area if you need any of the tools or other replacement parts seen in this video. Okay, now you're going to very carefully lift the cover off once the screws have been removed. And here's a good look at the underside of that cover. You can take the cover and just place it off to the side. And now you can see the bright shiny surface. That metal cover is hiding the battery, the cooling fan, and all the other components. You're going to have to unscrew all the screws holding down the metal cover. Once again, let's speed things up. Okay, with all the screws removed, you just have to remove the screw holding in the SD micro board. And all you have to do is lift it up carefully. There's a flat cable holding it in place. The cable is secured to the circuit board by pushing in the connector. So as we lift the cover, like you see right here, it's going to loosen that connector, allowing it to release. So just grab the cover, bend it just a little bit, and as you can see, it just popped off. A look at the underside, you can see the thermal compound right here, and that's the CPU cooler. Over here is your battery, and over here is the connector for the battery. Here's a closer look at the battery connector. In order to remove it, just place a piece of plastic or a toothpick under the connector and very gently pry upward. Here's the battery specifications for the Nintendo Switch. You can see the milliamp hour rating as well as the high voltage and low voltage output. To remove the battery is not a big deal. You just have to get underneath the battery to pry it up. You want to use a flat piece of plastic like you see here. A little wider is better. There is an adhesive on the back side of the battery. You're going to have to pry it out of that compartment. Once you do that, you're going to have to clean away any adhesive residue, and then you'll be able to install the new battery. Once the new battery is installed, push the connector back down until it's nice and flush, and you're good to go. Okay, to remove the CPU fan is very simple. You're going to very carefully peel off the tape that you see right here. The purpose of that tape is to ensure that the airflow from the fan, all of it passes through the cooling fins. Also remove the small piece of tape you see right here. And you're going to place both pieces of tape off to the side, because once the new fan is installed, you're going to have to reinstall the tape. You're going to remove the screw you see right here. It's a Phillips screw. The fan has 3 screws on it. Carefully lift it out. Then you're going to remove the next screw. And you can see the fan is now loose, but it's being held in by another screw underneath the cooling bar. Now to remove the cooling assembly, you're going to have to remove the 3 screws right here. Be careful not to get the thermal compound all over your hands. This piece of plastic, make sure it goes back where you found it in the exact position. It locks right in. Okay, with the 3 screws removed from the CPU cooler, very gently go underneath the copper bar and lift. And you're going to pull the whole thing out. Just be careful of the thermal compound. We're going to be wiping that off and applying new compound later. Gently lift without damaging any of the cooling fins, and place it off to the side. Right here is where the CPU is. Right here is the power connector for the fan, and underneath this circuit board is where the other screw is hidden. We need to remove one board. In order to do that, you're going to have to lift up on this long black bar, release the wide flat cable, and then you can just gently reach into the loop of the cable and pull it out. Once that's done, you're going to remove the screw from the board. And with the screw out of the board, the next thing we're going to do is just lift up on this plastic flap. Now it's going to release the connector for the fan. Just gently push it outward. Go back to the board. You're going to pivot it out of the way. Be very careful. Do not damage the flat cable on the left. Reach in with your screwdriver and take out the 3rd screw. With the 3rd screw removed, you should have no problem grabbing the fan and removing it. When you install the new one, very carefully just line everything back up. Insert the flat cable back into the connector. Push the flap down and make sure it's flush. That locks it in position. It cannot be pulled out. You're going to reinstall the screw. Then you're going to reinstall the board, but before you do that, you're going to push the flat cable out of the way. And then you're going to reinstall that flat cable, make sure it's all the way back in. Then you could push down the black bar again to lock it in place. You're going to make sure that black bar goes nice and flat. If you can feel that it's flat, it's definitely locked. Okay, once that's done, the next thing you're going to do is put the screw back into that board. Okay, that's done. Once the screw is back into the board, you can put the screws back into the cooling fan. The next thing you're going to do is clean away all the old thermal compound on the CPU. We're going to be applying new thermal compound. You don't have to get every little trace off, but you do want to get the bulk of the old thermal compound off. And you're also going to remove the thermal compound from the cooling bar as well. You're going to apply new thermal compound. Apply liberally, just don't get carried away putting too much. You want to have a decent layer on there, and take your finger and just flatten it out just a little bit. Once that's done, you're going to pull the wires away from the speaker right here. You do not want the wire getting caught between the CPU and the cooling bar. You're going to line the CPU cooler back up, and before you bolt it in, grab those speaker wires and you're going to pull on them to make sure they're not being pinched. Once that's done, you're going to reinstall the 3 screws. Okay, now that the screws are all installed, just double check one more time that the speaker wire is not being pinched by the cooling bar. Now we're going to put the tape back onto the cooling bar right over here at the end. Apply it in the exact same position that you removed it from. It's going to seal that area nice and tight, allowing all the pressure from the fan to be forced through the cooling fins and outside the device. Next thing you're going to do is apply the small one back into the same location. And that is it for the cooling fan. Then you're going to make sure that little black piece of plastic is put back in the same spot. It has a habit of falling out of there, so make sure it goes back before the shiny metal cover is installed. Alright, now the last thing I want to do is show you how to replace the speaker. If you have a factory replacement, usually it's going to have the speaker with the wire and the connector. If you have one of those, it's very simple. In the area highlighted in red, you're going to pull apart that connector and just lift up on the wires and the speaker will come out of the spot. If you don't have one of those factory parts and you want to try your own speaker, or you have an aftermarket speaker that doesn't have the wire or connector, then you're going to have to desolder the connections as shown. Using a 20-watt soldering iron, you're very carefully going to desolder each wire, taking note of the location of the positive and negative. Once it's desoldered, you can gently push the wires out of the way. The next thing you're going to do is gently pry up on the speaker, and you can see I removed the side rail to make it easier for that speaker to be lifted up without any damage to the flat cable. And very gently pry up on the speaker and it will lift. It has a rubber coating around it to prevent vibration. Once it's up, you can easily replace it with another speaker. Take the new speaker, install it, push it into position. If it's the same one, it'll fit exactly into that opening. Then you're going to take forceps to hold the wire in position where the negative was. Using your soldering iron, you're going to solder the connection back. Allow that to cool. Now we're going to take the other wire and very carefully solder that one back. And then you just want to push the wires out of the way to make sure they're not going to be caught when the cover goes back down. And then I can put the side rail back as well. Okay, now we're going to clean off the thermal compound on top of that cooling bar. You want to make sure the inside of the metal cover has all the thermal compound also cleaned off. And then apply the same thermal compound, a liberal amount. The purpose of applying compound on top is when the metal cover is placed back down, heat from the CPU can also be transferred into the metal cover. It helps dissipate the heat much better. When the metal cover is reinstalled, you want to make sure that the flat cables going to the slide rails on each side, that they're not being pinched by the metal. Once you know that they're clear, then you can screw everything back together. Reinstall the small circuit board for the SD micro. You're just going to make sure everything lines up, and you're going to push down on that rubber until you hear a click. It will lock into place. Once that's done, you're going to reinstall all the screws and you should be good to go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to rate thumbs up, share, and check out my extensive video playlist for many other videos of interest to you. Thank you very much for watching.